A Kaldor fact, a famous fact due to Nicholas Kaldor, is that the share of labor in national income is constant. Yeah, that's the balanced growth fact. This fact is starting to die. It's been dying for a few decades now. And here's another, is a very nice picture which comes from the work of Veronica Guerrieri, where she's looking at why, and you might ask, she's looking at the trend in labor shares over time. And you might ask, why are there so many lines? Well, there's so many lines because there is a huge percentage of the economy that goes into self-employment. When it goes into self-employment, you must make assumptions about deciding what share of self-employment income is to be called capital income and what share is to be called labor income. Yeah. But no matter how you cut that cake, and she cuts that cake in 6 different ways, if I've counted right, you see a declining share in what you're attributing to labor income. So the levels are different, okay, but the trend is the same. And then you see this for different countries as well. I put up some graphs for you over there. So there's definitely a tendency towards a falling share. You see it, by the way, here, this is just a simple graph which talks about percentage point losses in the labor share. On the x-axis are different countries, which you can't see, but I have highlighted some of these countries for you. And you can see that with the with one exception, Great Britain, you see a falling labor share in most OECD countries. And this is not just restricted to the economy as a whole. It's not a compositional argument. It's happening in different sectors of the economy. It's a within sector argument. Yeah. So you see this for a bunch of different sectors that the share, that the labor share is falling. Now, if you want to think about why this might happen, we can think of many obvious reasons, and probably all of them have some role to play in it. So one famous argument, of course, is globalization, the China shock. The China shock, of course, might be a good argument for developed countries, but it wouldn't explain, for example, why we continue to have, let's say, a falling labor share in India or China itself. Yeah. And so, you know, this argument, I'm sure, goes part of the way, but not all. Then there is an argument entirely based on the fact that labor has become weaker in all countries. And because it's become weaker, anti-union regulations and so forth, then firms can take advantage of that and place higher markups. And when they place higher markups, that creates a tendency for the share of capital to rise or the share of labor to fall. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the argument that there's ongoing technical progress and these nasty robots are kind of displacing labor. Now, all of these, one should ask, you know, is there a deeper explanation? For example, in the case of technical progress, why is it that we should assume that technical progress is set up in some divine way to displace labor, right? Why can't it be that technical progress goes the other way around and displaces capital and makes labor very good at producing things? So there's no particular conceptual reason to believe that technical progress will be biased on one side. So I'm going to come back to that issue later on. But the one argument that I think really sticks, there's something robust and strong about the argument, comes from actually the Ricardian theory of rent. So let's go back and think about what Ricardo said. So Ricardo said, as the world progresses, land will inherit the earth. Okay, well, that's almost a tautology, okay, because that's what the earth is made of. But the idea being that land is a fixed factor, everything else is growing, and therefore the returns to land have to progressively rise. Yeah. Now, fast forward a couple of centuries, and we are in a situation where we are relatively free of land, okay, not entirely, relatively free of land. And we can think of, as a first order approximation, as labor taking the role of land. Now, of course, there's population growth, right? But think of it, net out that treadmill, and just think of everything per capita, okay? So there's labor. Think of labor as the fixed factor, relatively speaking, after taking population growth out. And now think of accumulation of capital, right? So capital is accumulating. Now the fixed factor, so to speak, is labor. So if you apply the same idea, there will be a tendency to substitute regularly away from labor as long as an economy is growing.